Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Judy Jennings, and I'm chairing the meeting today. On my right, we have Councillors Richard Morgan, Alan Lyon, and sitting out, Brian Rolfe, who's going to be observing this afternoon. And the officers, we have Debbie Houghton, we have Jackie Leather, and Peter Jones, sorry. And we have our barrister here who will just be, I think, generally listening.
I'll be providing legal advice to the committee.
And this is Asitha Ranatun. Thank you. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing, with copies of the recording being made available to those that request it. If you are seated in the lower public seating area, it is likely that the recording cameras will capture your image, and this will result in the possibility that your image will become part of the broadcast. You should be aware that this may infringe your human and data protection rights. If you have any concerns, then please speak to the webcasting officer. Are there any apologies for absence?
No, Chairman, no apologies for absence.
Declarations of interest. I should like to declare that I sat on a committee in 2019 for an application by a previous owner of this establishment when it was, I believe, called Club 195. Any other declarations of interest?
Yes, Chairman, I'm the same. I did sit on an application about the same time, the same address.
I'm just...
Just at that stage,
Okay.
I think I would just ventilate whether any party has any objection to that fact before I advise on it.
Could you put, if you just press the button.
Thank you. Just as legal advisor, I'll just ask the parties whether anyone has, or anyone who's made an objection or any of the parties have any concern about that, and to raise it now if they do.
But there's no concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I don't believe there's any issue with that. It was a different applicant and a different licence holder, so I don't think there can be any issue.
I'm just going to run through the procedure of the meeting. First of all, the lead officer will outline the matter in hand. The applicant or representative will present his or her case with or without witnesses and be questioned by members or any objectors or persons making representations present. Then any objectors or persons making representations may then present their objections with or without witnesses and be questioned by members or the applicants or their representative. Then the objectors making representations may make a final statement without introducing new issues. Finally, the applicant has the right to make a final statement without introducing new issues. The decision, the committee will resolve to decide the application in private session, and if it becomes necessary to recall anyone for additional information, everyone will be invited to return to the hearing. I'm going to call now on our officer to introduce the application, please.
Thank you, Chair. This application has been made by CK Entertainments Limited, Playhouse and Playroom of 195199 Cottis Lane, Epping, for a variation of the existing premises licence at the same address. The application is for the following licensing activities: the provision of live music, Sunday to Thursday, 11 till midnight, Friday to Saturday, 11 till 02 in the morning. The provision of recorded music, Sunday to Thursday, 11 till midnight, and Friday to Saturday, 11 till 02 in the morning. The performance of dance, Sunday to Thursday, 11 to midnight, Friday to Saturday, 11 till 2 o'clock in the morning. Anything of a similar description to that above, Sunday to Thursday, 11 till midnight, Friday to Saturday, 11 till 02 in the morning. Late night refreshment, Sunday to Thursday, 2300 hours till midnight. Friday to Saturday, 2300 hours until 2 in the morning. And the sale by retail of alcohol, Monday to Thursday, 11 till midnight, and Friday to Saturday, 11 till 2 in the morning. This is for on and off the premises. The opening hours for this premises on this variation are to be Sunday to Thursday, 10:30 to 12:30 a.m, and Friday to Saturday, 10:30 to 2:30 a.m. The application was received on the 9th of September 2021. A copy of that application is attached. The operating schedule sets out conditions which will be attached to the licence if this application is granted.
Thank you. Before we continue, I need to ask you to identify yourselves. So if we could start with the applicants, please.
Madam, my name is Robert Sutherland. I'm representing the applicants in this regard. Can I start also by apologising? I am sucking a lozenge. It tastes absolutely disgusting, but it is helping me from stopping coughing and being able to breathe. So please forgive me. No disrespect is intended. Sitting next to me is James Hoffner. Mr. Hoffner is responsible for drafting many of the policies and making sure that they're implemented. He is the DPS at the premises. Sitting next to Mr. Hoffner is Richard Bunch. You will have seen his report, I think, within the evidence, and he will be addressing you later in that regard. On the back row, on the by far left, there's Mr. Kreshnik Shala, who is a bar manager, personal licence holder. Immediately behind me is Scott Yeoman, who's the security manager, ex-police officer with the Met. On my right behind me is Mr. Richard Vivian. He's the acoustician and can deal with any issues in relation to the noise and any allegations in relation to noise from the premises. And that's the applicant team.
Thank you. And on the other side, if you could introduce yourselves, please.
Yeah, my name's Kelsey Dott. I'm from Essex Police. I'm the licensing officer for Epping Forest and Harlow. And to my left is my manager. This is Ronan McManus, who is the senior licensing officer.
Thank you. And
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Councillor Nigel Avey, Epping Town Council, and also District Council, not to be confused.
John Whitehouse, I'm a resident of St John's Road and District Council Epping Hemnall, which is the other side of the High Street to the premises.
thank you. We have also with us officer who is just observing, Rosalie Ferreira. Yes. Okay, thank you. Right, would the applicant now or their representative present the case without witnesses and be questioned after by members or any objectors making representations present? So if you could present your case, please.
Thank you, Madam. What I would propose to do is obviously just take you through the basis of the application. I'll then call on Mr. Hoffner to explain a little bit about the operation that takes place at the premises. This application relates to only one part of the operation, but I think it's important that you're able to see, and the committee are able to see, everything else that goes on at the premises. We'll deal with the objections, and in dealing with the objections, we will look at the previous decisions of the committee and how we believe that we have addressed the issues that have been raised by the committee and why the committee can grant this particular application. So before I ask Mr. Hoffner to take over, let me just go through the application for you. It's set out at page 11 of your report. And you will note that, in essence, for the licensable activities, there is an increase in the hours authorising those activities from 1 o'clock in the morning till 2 o'clock on Fridays and Saturdays. You may also have picked up, Madam, that in fact there's also a reduction of an hour on Thursdays for all of the licensable activities from 1 o'clock to midnight. In respect of, and I raise this because I think it's raised by one of the objectors, in respect of off sales, the only off sales, Madam, are in relation to, at the end of the evening, if people have bottles which have not been completely finished, then they're resealed, and if the customer has transport, then those items are, as well as escorting the individual to the transport, the item is then placed in the transport. So that's the extent of the off sales. It's not any more than that, it's not any less than that, but it is a service that they provide. Mr. Hoffner can explain, I'm sure, if there are questions in relation to that operation as to how it's carried out, and obviously if the committee felt that it was appropriate to condition that in respect of the off sale, then that's something that we of course would agree to. Now, in respect of the application, as I've indicated, the premises licence really only covers one part of the operation at the premises, and I think it would be helpful for the committee if Mr. Hoffner explains to you the wider operation at the premises and how the playhouse fits in with the rest of the premises.
Madam Chairman, the venue is really three distinct entities. There is Playhouse, Playroom and Playfit. Playhouse is when the nightclub is in operation and is really the thrust of the application today. And it involves the entire premises. Playroom is the cocktail bar, which is just at the rear of the premises, and it has a terrace and then a garden down below. This cocktail bar is open as on evenings and when the nightclub is not trading at night. So that's why we've sought for sale of alcohol during the week as well. Playfit is a fitness studio, and obviously rents being what they are in Epping, we look to utilise the space as much as possible. So we cover the bars up with big covers during the day, so you don't see the alcohol. We have changing rooms which are built downstairs. We have male and female changing rooms. Then we have people coming in from all sorts of different, especially mums doing yoga. We use the lights on the roof to do classes for disabled kids. We have one of the directors of the venue has an autistic son, so we use them to stimulate their autism and do all sorts of things like that. We also have boxing classes where we hang boxing bags down and really make to use the gym space, make to use the nightclub space when it's not trading as a nightclub, because you can imagine for 2 days a week we do need to do other things as well. Following on from obviously making use of the space, especially for disabled children, we do have disabled employees as well at the venue. We have one employee who is completely deaf, who works in the nightclub. We also had a very a DJ at the weekend who had cerebral palsy and was in a wheelchair, and he was a very good DJ and very well received by everyone. We certainly enjoyed having him down, so we certainly look to put out our links to disabled people and look to include them in our operation. We also, from a staffing point of view, we were approved by the Job Centre in Loughton for a Kickstarter scheme where we have 5 young people, all of whom are just out of college. They all live in the local area, and we are training them in hospitality, and they want to go into hospitality, and that's the purpose of the scheme, is to give them an added boost to help things. So we are certainly engaging with the Job Centre in Loughton to make sure we employ local people. To that end, we also employ one ex-offender who was identified as being at risk of reoffending when he left prison. He is working for us. He is collecting glasses and cups. So we are certainly trying to help him as well. We also have an ex-serviceman who was referred to us by the Job Centre again in Loughton to make sure that he gets work after he was employed, after he left the army. And he works for us as well, being a waiter, helping out within the venue. So we certainly do try to engage on a fairly regular basis with the Job Centre in Loughton, and all of our employees do come from the local area. I will leave it for Mr. Sutherland on that note.
It may be helpful, Madam, in relation to just the layout of the premises. There's a plan which is positioned within your papers at pages 307 and 308. Mr. Hoffner, can it just with reference to that, because it may assist the committee understand, particularly, I suppose, play room and playhouse, how they fit within that.
So, Madam Chairman, if you look on the first floor, which is what I would call the ground floor, there's the main entrance. This is when you come into Playhouse, and also when you're accessing the fitness studio. As you can see directly behind the reception, there are changing rooms for the men and the ladies. There are extensive changing rooms with showers, water closets, and all those sort of normal amenities you'd expect from any gym changing room. We use them in the evening for staff changing. We also use it as a medical area and a security sort of room when we're trading as Playhouse. Then if you go upstairs, you will see that there's the fire exit which comes from the back. At the back of that is our fenced garden, which is in the application. There are photographs. And then you come up to the terrace, and then if you look at those second set of double doors, that is the end of Playroom. So when Playroom is in operation, it is just that first room to the side. When Playhouse is in operation, it is the entire venue. So just to draw distinctions between them. If you will notice that the toilets are accessible from either side, from Playhouse and Playroom. Obviously, when it is just Playhouse, the door going into the club is locked, so that people can't mistakenly wander from one to the other.
Thank you. Madam, just before moving on to the previous decisions, I'm also informed that there's connections with the Prince's Trust, who also provide some of the DJs who come from them in order to facilitate and build. Sorry, door supervisors. Sorry, madam. I read it as DJs, but it in fact is DSs, door supervisors. My apologies. So it's the door supervisors who come from the Prince's Trust, as there's a contract with them to provide staff to. Madam, if I could direct your attention now to page 78 and 79 of your bundle. You'll note that this is the decision of the committee back in 2019, July 2019, and whilst the first part of the decision starts on page 78, I'm looking to draw your attention to page 79, which sets out the reasons why the application was granted. So we have the first one: we're impressed by the evidence given on behalf of the applicant, and particularly the evidence of Mr. Hoffner, satisfied that there's been a sufficient change of management of the premises which reduces the risk of the previous failures from recurring. Number two, there's a disagreement in relation to the police suggestion that there's been a stark reduction in crime since the closure of the premises. The third point, that the applicant had accepted the decision to revoke the Club 195 licence was correct as a result of the wholesale operational management failure. Concerns are then raised at point 4, that the application proposes to significantly intensify the use of the premises compared to its operation as Club 195. Club 195 previously opened just one night a week, whereas this proposal seeks to open 3 nights a week. Number 5, we would like to give the applicant an opportunity to make good on the promises made to us at the hearing. We acknowledge their collective experience, but also have taken into account that the applicant is proposing a brand new business model with new personnel and with a greater number of nights of operation. Sixthly, taking all this into account, we consider that requiring all licensable activities to cease at 0100, with the premises closing at 0130, strikes a fair balance and is appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives, in particular the crime and disorder and public safety objectives. And point 7, by granting the premises licence, we've taken into account the applicant's right to apply for temporary event notices, which will give them an opportunity to road test their new model to a later hour, and the possibility of making an application to vary the licence we have granted to extend the hours of operation, if the applicant can demonstrate that doing so would not undermine the licensing objectives. And then there's a reference in relation to the garden terrace. You'll note, Madam, that this application focuses really on the additional hours of 2 nights a week. I think it's correct that the premises really is only operated on 2 nights a week, it has operated on 3 nights a week. I'll hand over to Mr. Hoffner, because I think he may...
Sorry, if it assists, Madam Chairman. The playroom has operated, and obviously that is licensable activities. So we have operated on a cocktail bar basis on more than 2 nights a week. Obviously the nightclub element has only operated on the Fridays, Saturdays. That's why we have cut the hours back on the Thursday and sought to extend them on the Fridays and Saturdays, because we aren't looking to open the nightclub on a Thursday night.
Thank you. I think that clarifies that point, Madam. So it's the nightclub element which is only operating on 2 nights a week. Madam, the next decision that I'd like to draw your attention to, because it obviously follows on from the original grant of the licence in July 2019, is the decision that's made in September 2020. And that decision, Madam, starts on page 81, but the main part that I'm going to refer you to is on page 82. And this is a refusal. This was a time-limited application, which was to extend the hours, in effect, till 3 o'clock. And the decision given by the committee is we had regard to our reasons for the grant of the premises licence on the 29th of July 2019. As we explained on that occasion, we were satisfied that ceasing trading at 0100 was a fair balance to promote the licensing objectives, but that the premises had had an opportunity to road test trading until 0300 via temporary event notice. We heard today that the premises had not traded since that licence was granted. We also heard that no temporary event notices have been submitted. We therefore remain of the view that there is inadequate evidence to demonstrate the premises can be satisfactorily operated in line with the licensing objectives until 0300. We also remain of the view that the premises could seek a temporary event notice to road test the later opening hours. Madam, it probably goes without saying, but I shall say it anyway. Of course, the premises has been affected, as we all have, in relation to the pandemic, and obviously, due to the pandemic, was effectively not able to open and operate until the summer of this year. And as you'll have seen from the report, actually opens in July. And you can see, Madam, from page 13 of your bundle, that at the in the middle of the page, there's a table which sets out all the temporary event notices. It sets out 18 days from the 25th of July until last weekend. There is also, Madam, which is not shown in the report because I think it was possibly just after the report, there is a late temporary event notice which covers this weekend, the 6th and 7th of November. That will take it to 20 days. There is 1 day left, I think, in relation to temporary event notices. The Nightclub, I'm told, opened in July, and the bar opened... At the end of the pandemic. Sorry, madam. The bar opened at the end of the pandemic, which would have been in May, but the actual nightclub only opened in July. Madam, it will be my submission that given the decisions of the committee previously, given the temporary event notices, given the evidence that we will address and cover now, that we have complied with everything that we said that we would do, and we have complied with everything that was required of us by the committee. And on that basis, we ask the committee to extend the licence as requested on Fridays and Saturdays until 2 o'clock. Now, in respect of how we've addressed what the committee wanted us to do and how we have done what we said we would do, I want to address that through the objections. And so what I'm going to focus on now, if I may, Madam, are the objections which have been put in. And I think we'll look at the police objection to start with. Now, this is set out on pages 36, 37 of your report, of your paper, sorry, and then it goes through a number of instances of crimes, incidents, and that's set out on pages 38 to page 42. Now, as I understand it, you will be shown later on this afternoon CCTV, body-worn video of an incident in July. And obviously this is our opportunity to set out to you the circumstances which in fact lead up to the recordings that either you've seen or you will see at some stage during this hearing. And to that end, there are 3 people here who were actually present on that night. And I'm going to call upon, in a moment, Mr. Bunch to address the incident which is referred to in the papers on the 24th, 25th of July, and take you through the perspective from the premises and the things that the premises put into place. So this event would not have happened. I'm going to say something very bold, Madam. This event would not have happened had it not been for the actions of the officers on that particular night. And we make no bones about this, Madam. It is very much our view that the situation was in control until the police took over. And it's at that stage problems arose. Now, Madam, I will let the experts explain to you as to why that is the case. And to that end, Madam, I'm going to hand over to Mr. Bunch. The other 2 persons who were present, of course, were Mr. Yeoman, who was head of security on that night, and, of course, Mr. Hoffner, who was present as designated premises supervisor, general manager. So, Mr. Bunch, can I ask you to address the committee in respect of the events on the 24th, 25th of July?
Sorry, Chair, can I just come in at that stage just briefly? There is, I understand, to be reference to the expert witness report of Mr. Bunch. Is that right, Mr. Sutherland?
Mr. Bunch does... thank you. Mr. Bunch does provide a comment, a rebuttal, I think, almost, of the police officer comments. That's on the additional papers, and I'm grateful to Mr. Ranatunga for drawing those to your attention. they're on the additional papers that were circulated, I think, yesterday. Mr Bunch.
Sorry, and so...
Oh.
Just to deal with the formalities of that, Chair, that did come in, I understand, on the weekend and has been seen by the police. I don't understand there's any objection to it, whether there is or there isn't. It's come in before the hearing, and so it is admissible. But I don't know whether the police have any comment in relation to it or do want to object, but that would be my advice. It's still admissible. I'm grateful.
Right, thank you. Carry on.
Good afternoon, Chairman. Just before I go into my expert report, I'd just like to give a little bit more background from my own personal background, in that I served 3 decades in both Sussex and the Metropolitan Police. I now operate as the crime disorder consultant for complete licensing, and I've been very much involved in a number of applications for various venues in and around the southeast of England. And when I retired in April 2016, I was one of the 2 licensing sergeants for Westminster. And I served in various crime and uniform arenas throughout my career. So my experience in policing is fairly extensive. I would also like to add that I was responsible for the crime and disorder reports that were on the initial submissions for this licensing application over the last 2 years. And I've been very much involved with this project from the word go. We opened on the 25th of July this year, and on the 24th of July I spent the entire evening with Mr Hoffner and Mr Yeomans and his various other team of experts training the staff and the security teams for the venue, because we realised that we would be in the spotlight, and we have done everything we possibly could to ensure we delivered a complete package for the Playhouse and for the local community of Epping. Now, I understand that you will view items of CCTV this afternoon in relation to events that have taken place in Epping, one from the police and one from a member of the public. Firstly, I'd like to talk about the events of the 25th of July this year, which was our opening night, which had been a very successful evening with little incident. And at the point that we were clearing out, unfortunately, 2 individuals took it upon themselves to have an altercation outside of the club and entered into a scuffle, a fight. In any case, it was very, very quickly dealt with by our security team. Mr Yeoman and his team and Mr Hoffner were immediately on site. I was at the venue that evening. I witnessed it with my own eyes. I witnessed it physically and through the CCTV system. The police were called and they quickly attended. Both the parties involved had already been handcuffed and detained and presented to the police. This was both uniformed PCs and uniformed sergeants. They were given the opportunity to view the CCTV in the premises, which is extensive, both inside and out. All of this took place outside of the premises after we had closed. The 2 people involved in the scuffle were presented to the police, and there were some other scuffles that took place in and around it. But all the parties were detained. Our own paramedic dealt with the injuries, and everybody was able to leave. Why people were able to leave is beyond me. We had 2 people that should have been arrested, detained and dealt with, either for assaults or at the very least a Section 3 offence of affray. This was not done. And from what I can gather from the police report, neither was the crime recorded as per the recording standards required, which I find very difficult to understand. 2 sergeants, a number of PCs, the matter was not dealt with properly or appropriately. They refused to view the CCTV. They refused to gather all the evidence. They refused to make arrests. They refused to deal with the detained individuals. For me, that's nothing more than a neglect of duty by failing to investigate. And why that's not been actually dealt with internally by Essex Police, I find hard to believe at this time. But maybe that's a matter we need to take up in the future. The situation is, you will see CCTV later on this afternoon, and the opening shot in that CCTV, you will see a young male with a bloodied face and a ripped T-shirt. That is the same male that was handcuffed and presented to police after his release. Still in the face of police officers, still not dealt with, still causing issue. After my colleagues have put themselves at risk detaining these individuals in the first place. Had the individuals been dealt with correctly in the first instance, this ongoing scenario of potential public order and disruption in the high street of Epping would not have happened. And I would like to actually continue with the fact that if we can't get support from our local policing teams, because wherever you go, whatever nightclub, and believe you me, I've dealt with many, many over the years, you'll get incidents. You cannot ignore that fact. But we dealt with it properly, and it's a sad situation. But it doesn't matter if you've got a pub, a club, casino, something will always happen. We didn't get any support that night, and that's why the police had ongoing issues out in the town. The footage will continue on as well, where it will show a further arrest of a male that evening. I don't know why he was arrested. It was a heavy-handed arrest. He was dragged to the ground and shortly afterwards de-arrested. Why do that? But it all looks very dramatic. It's all flashing lights and it carries on. That's all I have to say on that at the moment.
Madam Chairman, not to rake over old ground, but just to be very clear, myself and Mr Yeoman both handcuffed two individuals. We detained them, performed citizen's arrest, and they were de-arrested by Essex Police. I personally offered two sergeants to come in and view the CCTV as it happened outside the premises, but was covered by our CCTV. They both declined to view the CCTV and just walked away and released the two people who were arrested. If they were positively dealt with by Essex Police, the CCTV which you are going to view would not exist, and I would suggest it is actually an indictment of Essex Police's failings rather than the venues.
Thank you, Mr Hoffner. Mr Bunch, can you continue with regards to the other incidents? So moving on to the other occasions, so moving on from the 25th of July, I think the next one is in August.
The next reported crime from Essex Police is at point B in their objection. And that is of a female that they state suffered severe injuries and an offence of wounding has been recorded, which is totally goes against the evidence that we have. Now, bearing in mind, I review all the incident reports, record them and check them over, and will actually investigate them should that be required. And obviously an incident at this level, I would look at that. It appears, unfortunately, someone has thrown one of the plastic cups within the venue and it has struck a female just above the left eye, and it caused a small cut. It was dealt with, by our paramedic. It was cleaned, closed and dealt with, and the lady in question was able to resume her activity within the club for the next 2.5 hours. And then 10 days later, she reports the fact that she suffered an injury within the club and it required stitches. We do not believe that that is the case. We do not believe there was a Section 20 wounding involved in that incident, and from the evidence that I have, it's nothing more than a common assault and battery. In relation to this, we did not let any individuals go. We couldn't identify any individuals from the CCTV and the darkness in the amount of people in the room who threw the cup. Had we done so, we would have detained them and offered them to Essex Police.
Mr Hoffner, I think you were present on that occasion as well. Do you want to add anything?
Yes, I was. I mean, I saw the scratch, for want of a better word, myself. She went back to her table, continued with a plaster. I dealt with the initial officer, who was from CID, provided him with CCTV remotely. I also provided him with a witness list of everybody who had been in the venue. He couldn't identify anybody. It was then reclassified, and a more junior officer was given the task of investigating it. I provided him with further CCTV, all of which was done remotely. They remotely download it. Now they don't need to turn up to the venue. We try to let them sit at their desks. He couldn't identify anyone who was there. So, I mean, how the report can say that Dawes staff ejected suspects without knowing the injuries inflicted is completely and utterly misleading, because 2 police officers have reviewed the CCTV and they cannot identify the suspects. So if they can't in the cold light of day of an office, I'm not entirely certain how we were supposed to know who it was in a busy nightclub. I'm not convinced that it was malicious in any way. I think somebody threw a plastic cup and it happened to hit somebody. I think it was more accidental than a crime.
Mr Bunch, looking then at the next crime which is recorded, which I think is the 22nd of August.
Sorry. Yes, Chairman, 22nd of August relates to an assault that took place outside the George and Dragon public house. The person who assaulted was one of the patrons from the playhouse that evening, but he wasn't assaulted from anyone from within the playhouse. He was making his way home and was subject of a pretty indiscriminate attack from what I can gather. But again, this has been levelled at the playhouse. Again, the playhouse medic was available to deliver the initial first aid, and our staff brought the matter to the attention of the police. So, again, because one of our clients is making his way home and is subject of attack, why level that at the playhouse? That is, he's enjoyed a night out, he's not caused any trouble, he's been subject of an indiscriminate attack. But the police have chosen to include it in their evidence and blame the playhouse for his assault. That is not the case. It has had nothing to do with the playhouse, but our staff did actually attend and deal with that injured party.
Mr Hoffner, I think you were also present on that particular occasion. Perhaps if there's anything to add to the committee and any steps that you've taken following on from that, please.
Yes, indeed, Mr Chairman. Madam Chairman, sorry. Following on from that incident, we have also hired a CCTV van, which we park on Epping High Street at our cost, because we can't gain access to the CCTV from the council. We don't do this on every night. We do this on a risk-assessed basis when we are running at capacity. We park it just at the end of the Cottis Lane, with its cameras facing up and down, so that should one of our patrons on their way home be assaulted again, we can deal with that. Just again, from inconsistencies in the police record in front of you, flagged down by Dawes staff. It wasn't, it was flagged down by myself, but that's a minor thing. Secondly, they turn around and say that the staff body cameras were not recording. That's completely and utterly false. The body cameras were recording, but because it happened so far away, I'm sure you're all very familiar with Epping High Street. The George and Dragon is 160 metres away from the playhouse, and our door staff were not there for it to be captured on their cameras. So it wasn't the question that they were not recording. They were not present in that area, because where we disperse is much more round the end of Cottis Lane going on to Epping High Street. So again, I would suggest that that's slightly misleading. It implies that we had them off when we didn't. It just wasn't covered. It was too far away.
Thank you, Mr Hoffner. In relation then to the incident on the 9th of October, I think you're also present, so do you want to cover that one?
Yes, I certainly do. This was two women who had a minor altercation inside the club. One slapped the other one. They were immediately separated by door staff and myself. One was placed in the office and one was placed outside. The woman outside was vexed, shall we say, that she was ejected first, and decided to complain to police. I am not, and I'm sure no rational person would expect me to object onto the same street two parties that had just had a row inside, because they will just continue their row outside. So it is a tried and tested method, and I hope Essex Police will accept that we acted very responsibly in separating the parties. And I'm getting nods from Kelsey, so there we go, I will take that. We separated the parties, ejected one. When she left the area, the other woman was ejected. The woman made false allegations to police, and I'm rather upset that it was recorded, but it was false allegations because she didn't approve of being ejected in the first place.
Mr Bunch, if I may, obviously incidents happen at licensed venues, whatever time of day, but also obviously late at night. Is there anything specific or particular about these incidents which make this premises different or poorly operated, or would you say that the operations and response to it was of a responsible operator?
Chairman, without doubt from my experience, you will not stop incidents taking place at any licensed premises, as I've already mentioned. In this case, we have done everything we possibly can to avoid incidents, and when we have had an incident, I can assure you it's recorded properly, it's dealt with properly. Any evidence is seized and uploaded to the complete licensing system for the police and for us to review any potential issues that we have. What's happened at the Playhouse over the last few months, for the amount of footfall we've had through the business, is minimal, and is nothing more than I would expect for a venue of that nature. And an interesting fact as well for overall crime in Epping, if you look at this year's figures, consistently from January to June, they sit around the 190 to 200 mark each month for the area of Epping. Since we opened at the end of July, August figures were 137 crimes and September 167 crimes, the lowest they've been for ages. Now, is that by the fact that it's just been a bit of luck for Essex Police, or is it the fact that actually our dispersal policies and the fact that we have high visibility patrols within Epping over a weekend period is actually helping to reduce crime? It's an argument to consider.
Thank you, Mr Bunch. Madam, I'd like to, if I may, at this stage, move on to the other objections. You've got, obviously, the remainder of Mr Bunch's report, additional report, where he deals with the each specific point raised by the police, and I don't propose to go through that separately with you. I'm sure the committee will have read it. In relation to the other objections, what I would look to do, Madam, is to ask Mr Hoffner to address you in respect of his response to those objections and how that is included within our approach to the community and dealing with people who live and work around the premises. So, Mr Hoffner, please.
Madam Chairman, first of all, we did have one more objection, which I'm sure your officer will tell you. After receiving the objection, I contacted all the objectors, invited them down to the venue to come and see and have a chat and see if we could work to make sure that we were good neighbours, because everyone wants to be good neighbours, and we want to run a business, they want to enjoy their lives, and I'm sure that we can do both successfully. I invited the objector, who has since withdrawn. He came down, was very impressed, and didn't see the need to maintain his objection. I will then deal with the other objections. The Town Council, I attempted to contact on a number of occasions. I was met with stony silence. I have spoken to Councillor Avery today. I did want to invite them down to engage in a partnership level so that we could try and do some working with them, and to show them the venue and to show the processes that we have in place It's all very good to provide them with a 300-page document, but actually, if you see it in the flesh, I think it's a very different kettle of fish. So I did really want to get them down, and I am still keen, and I did offer Councillor Avery at the beginning of the session for the Town Council to come and have a look at the venue, and I hope that the Town Council do take that up. Then Councillor Whitehouse, I met at the premises, I showed him round, and I would like to think he was impressed, but I will certainly let him answer those questions. Mrs. Knight, I don't know which one she lives at. I have emailed her on a number of occasions. I have also copied in Mr. Vivian because she mentioned noise. Mrs. Knight confirmed to me in an email that it was really car noise that she was worried about. She wasn't really worried about anything else. And I don't know how far away she lives. And Mrs. Hooton has been unable to find that out as well, or provide me with the details. So we can't sort of really say, and she did seem very keen at the beginning to come and see me, but she hasn't had the time or the opportunity to do so. And then lastly was Mr. and Mrs. Hall. Mr. and Mrs. Hall did not provide any email details, so as the precocious man I am, I went round and knocked on their door. So I went and spoke to Mr. and Mrs. Hall. I invited them for coffee. They politely declined, but did invite me in to sit with them. Mr. and Mrs. Hall were worried because they heard on one occasion when the club first opened noise in the afternoon. I would suggest, and I suggested to them, that it was when we were installing and testing the system. I have offered to them, and the offer remains for Mr. Vivian to trundle out and to do some noise monitoring in their premises so that we can make sure the system is set so that it never impacts on their lives again. They did decline because they said that it was only on one occasion that they heard the noise and they haven't heard it since. I left my contact details, I left Mr. Vivian's contact details with them, and should they hear anything else, they will be in contact. They did confirm to me that they wouldn't be coming to the hearing, and I noticed that they're not here now. That is it. Just very quickly, with the police objection, I have engaged with the police on a number of occasions. I think Ronan is probably fed up of me phoning him, and I think Kelsey is probably as well. But we have engaged on a number of occasions. We have had meetings at the premises. I have also asked for the local response teams to come down and for people of senior rank to come down. Unfortunately, they have declined and they have not engaged with us. The only people that have engaged with us are officers that have been passing, and I have basically grabbed them and dragged them in for a cup of tea to show them round. So those are the only officers that have actually been in. But I would like to offer, and I would like to offer in front of you, Madam Chairman, for any officer of rank or any area commander to pop down and see the venue so that they can see how we operate and what we do to ensure the licensing objectives are being upheld.
Mr. Hoffner, if I could also ask you at this stage, you've put into place a number of policies and practices. Have those policies and practices, have you adapted them at all since implementing them and opening? What's been your practice in relation to that?
Yes, Madam Chairman. First of all, I would like to explain the way that our instant reporting system works. Mr. Bunch sits down in sunny Cornwall and he gets the instant reports that happen of an evening. He does this for quite a number of venues. He remotely logs into CCTV and he remotely logs into body camera footage. He then views any incident, compiles a whole package as to what actually happened, so that should the police in a month's time or in a year's time wish to know further information about an incident, I can send them a link and they can immediately view, not need to come to the venue, not need to wait for us to photocopy things or anything. It's all immediately there for them. And I have already started sharing stuff with Kelsey when she has requested it. Mr. Bunch does this for a number of venues. Obviously, Mr. Yeoman behind us is a retired policeman. He oversees the security, and then along with Mr. Tony Nash, who was here for the original hearing. I don't know if either of you were on that hearing panel, I can't remember. But Mr. Nash was a retired borough commander, and he sort of sits and makes sure that we're doing everything that we possibly could. We have adapted our processes. As mentioned previously, the CCTV van was not there at the beginning. We have put that in. Again, that is not, and I don't want to mislead the committee in any way or make you think that we do it on every night. We do this on a risk-assessed basis. So when we are very busy, there is a van. We also have our patrol car, which is provided by Mr. Yeoman, which goes up and down the high street at the end of the night to make sure that people have dispersed the entire length of the high street. We don't just do that on foot. We do that with a vehicle as well. We have given further training, and we will be giving handcuff training to all staff. At the moment, only certain members of security are handcuff trained, but we will be rolling that out to everyone. Madam Chairman, if there's anything further for me, please.
Sorry, Mr. Hoffner, I did have another question for you. In relation to the committee decision when they granted the licence back in 2019, at that stage, of course, they indicate to you that they're giving you an opportunity to road test the new model to a later hour possibility through temporary event notices, so that you can demonstrate that doing so would not undermine the licensing objectives. Given that you've operated the premises since July with the temporary event notices, to which no police objections were received, do you feel there's anything you would want to say or add to the committee to say that you've demonstrated that you can promote the licensing objectives by operating with the policies you've set out?
I think the biggest indication of that is the fact that last week I submitted a late 10, which the police have an absolute right to object to, and in fact there is no appeal even to a licensing court, or licensing committee, sorry. The late 10 was not objected to, it was granted. And I think Essex Police are being slightly inconsistent with not objecting to that, but putting an objection into this application.
Thank you. Madam, what we've sought to do in this regard is to look at the original decision of the committee.
I'm sorry, can we not have that off a moment? I've got a video on my screen. Yes.
Thank you, Madam. Madam, what we've sought to do is to look at the original decision which was made by the committee back in 2019, to look at the reasons for that decision and what the committee were asking of us. And, Madam, hopefully through the responses you've heard from Mr. Hoffner and Mr. Bunch, and the other written evidence that's been submitted, you can see that we've looked to do what we were asked to do. We have looked to do what we said we would do, and it's on that basis that we request that the committee grant the extensions that we've asked for, unless you've got any questions, Madam.
Thank you. Have you completed your statement now?
Thank you, Madam, yes.
Right. Do we have any? Right, Councillor Lyon.
Yeah, the first question I wanted to raise was a little bit of clarity, because I must say I'm a little bit confused with the hours of operation. On a statement I think was made was that late night opening was going to be Thursday, Friday and Saturday, and yet I can't find that in the application, and I can only find reference to the premises being open at that time. So could you clarify exactly when the late night opening is going to be?
So yes, it may have been my confusion, so I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Hoffner to clarify for you.
Yes, and Councillor, I will apologise. There's probably a hang-up from a badly edited document, given the changes. We did originally want to operate on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We are only looking to, as the application states, operate late on the Thursday and Friday. The cocktail bar will be open during the week as the permitted hours up till midnight, but the nightclub element will only seek to operate on the Fridays and Saturdays up until 2 o'clock. I hope that's clear enough for you.
Yeah, okay.
And I do apologise for my poor editing.
In addition, sir, to that, in fact, on Thursdays, there is a reduction in hours from 1 o'clock to midnight.
Yeah, I thought I was confused with what you were saying, but it sounds like you're confused. Or somebody was confused. Anyway, we got the right information now. The other thing that I wanted to raise was under section 11, provision of anything of a similar description to live music. What do you see as that applying to?
I think that's a hang-up of the licensing regime. Live music, we have saxophonists who play along, we have bongo players who play along to the music within the club. So it's just, for the avoidance of doubt, it's anything similar along those lines. But yes, that's it.
So it's essentially a catch-all for anything that you hadn't thought of in the first place?
I think that's a catch-all for the licensing regime rather than for me.
Right, Councillor Morgan.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. Security. How do you prevent knives and weapons being brought into the premises? And how many of the customers do you actually check? Oh, sorry.
I can walk you through the entry procedure. Everybody who comes into the venue when the nightclub element is open, you'll appreciate, as I said, there's 3 separate businesses. When the nightclub element is open, they're greeted at the door, they queue up, they then come into the premises, they then have their ID scanned. That is a condition on the licence. We have an exception for 20 people a night, and that is basically if one person of a group, that's not that I would let 20 people in without ID, if one person from a group doesn't have their ID, I then take their name, address, and assuming that they have a photograph on their telephone, I then photograph it on my telephone of their ID, but it won't fit in the ID scanner. So if they are scanned, they then go in, they walk through a metal detecting search arch. Then when they go through the metal detecting search arch, there are 2 members of security there. They supplement this search with wands, which they both have, and again, that is conditioned on the licence. They then get a pat-down search, and anything found is then disposed of. Obviously, if they are found with drugs, they are ejected from the venue, providing we deem it to be under the amount for dealing. The amount for dealing is set within our policy documents and is deemed to be 3 wraps of cocaine or more, or 3 different pills. If we find a knife, they are detained, or any weapon, they are detained, and Essex Police will be called. I have to say, since opening, we have found the occasional bit of personal drug use where they have been ejected, but we have never found a weapon as of yet. And I think with a big metal detecting search arch, which we actually got second-hand from Stansted Airport, that they realise it's very obvious, it's very bright. People are told that they will search. If you look on our website, we have our entry procedure, which explains to everybody that everybody requires ID, and that is not to do with age. That is so that when an incident happens, we can print off an incident list and I can immediately email it to Essex Police and say, these were the people in the venue, 100%. And I wouldn't want to work at a club that didn't have it.
Sarah, if I could just, I suppose, put the legal framework onto the very good flesh that Mr. Hoffner has referred to. If I could refer you to page 61, so which is the licence and the conditions on the licence. The conditions aren't numbered, so which makes it a little difficult, but if you look at the centre of the page, there's a paragraph which reads, the premises licence holder will ensure that at least 4 SIA licensed store supervisors, so on and so forth. Underneath that, sir, is the relevant condition which talks about no patrons, DJs, performers, along with their guests and entourage, or guests of staff will be admitted or readmitted to the premises after 2100 unless A, they have had their ID scanned on entry, B, they have passed through a functioning metal detecting search arch, and been physically searched in accordance with the premises entry policy, which will include a full bag search, and the searching will be supplemented by the use of 2 functional metal detecting wands operated by a male and, so far as reasonably possible, female door supervisor dedicated to that duty either until the end of permitted hours or until there are no further admissions. Where a female door supervisor is not available, this shall be logged.
Okay, thank you. And just one more question. You mentioned about if customers have half a bottle or part drink left, they can take it out with them. Did I hear that correct? And is it in a bottle or a plastic glass?
Councillor, if I might, that's there to stop arguments, basically. If people have started a bottle and we're telling them that we're now closed, people get very upset, and we use it as a diffusing tool to say, well, you can take it home with you, but we can't allow you to walk out with it. This is always what we tell people. So what we do is we put it in a bag, a member of staff takes the bottle, it is resealed. Yes, they are glass, but they are held by a member of staff. We then walk to whatever transport they have, and when they are in the transport and they want to go home, we then put it in there with them for them to go. What I am not allowing to do, and would be happy for any condition, I'm trying to think of how it would be worded, but I am not allowing customers to walk out with the bottles in their hand because I don't want to get smacked around the head, to be very honest. Okay. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Did you want to ask another question? Yes. Councillor Lyon.
Just if I may ask a couple more questions. I mean, the bottle was one that I picked up as well. Glass bottles being taken out of a club when someone's had a few drinks is probably not ideal. I was interested in your CCTV activities, particularly I couldn't see anything on the plans where they were shown within the club. It's pretty small, so I couldn't actually identify it. And I also wanted to understand a bit more about the CCTV van. Was that in the High Road or was that in Bakers Lane? And people leaving along Bakers Lane into the car park, how is that observed from your perspective to maintain some sort of order from people sort of going to cars when they've probably had a few drinks? There was also one other question while I'm... Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. First of all, we have an extensive CCTV system that has been seen by Essex Police. We have 2 massive screens on the wall where we have 52 cameras. It was worked out with Essex Police, with the previous licensing officer. There is not an area that isn't covered, and I mean including the toilets. The toilets have got cameras in them. You are pulling a face, and yes, I fully agree. They cover the hand wash areas only. They do not cover the cubicles, and they do not cover the urinals, but they do cover the hand wash areas. I always make fairly crude jokes about how much you can see with the quality of the cameras. I won't repeat them now. Yes, you can certainly see everything within the premises. There is a 360 dome in the middle of the dance floor that views out. I wouldn't think that Essex Police have any criticism of the CCTV system at all. Kelsey's shaking her head, so I will take that. The CCTV van is parked at the end of Cottis Lane on Epping High Street. Most of our patrons who hang around are waiting for Ubers and waiting for taxis to arrive, and they wait on Epping High Street. CCTV vans are somewhat dear, let me tell you, and there has to become a stage where we sort of draw the line. We put the CCTV van on Epping High Street. Patrons who go the other way to cars, I am assuming if they are going to a car, as I'm sure Essex Police would have alerted me if there was any allegations of drink driving from the venue. There has not been. There are designated driver schemes and those sorts of things. So anyone going there, I would assume, would be with somebody sober who would be more inclined to look after them, get them in a car and probably want to go home because he's enjoyed his dancing, but probably time for bed. So we don't have any CCTV coverage that way. We do have on the corner of our premises pointing outwards, so we do get that corner at the back of M&S. but that's really as far as we can go. I have to say, I think the Information Commission would probably tell me off for putting them on the public high road, but there's a bit of a balance, and I think our system is GDPR compliant and ICO compliant.
So if I could also refer you to the papers, and I accept that they are extensive in relation to policies and practices, but page 176 sets out the proposed CCTV layout, and there are two plans which are at page 177 and 178. I have to say, so when I try and enlarge them on my screen, they don't particularly enlarge very clearly, but hopefully that will give you an idea, sir, of the extensive coverage of the CCTV cameras.
Just one further question. Referring to page 41, where there's an incident on the 8th of August, it said door staff ejected a suspect without knowing injuries inflicted. Just a little bit behind. So how did the suspect get identified, and why were they ejected?
Councillor, I dealt with that when we were going through things, but just to reiterate, door staff did not eject any suspects. The police have viewed the CCTV and cannot identify any suspects within the crowd. And two officers, one senior detective and one junior detective, have viewed the CCTV. I have provided extensive CCTV to them. They cannot identify. This is a misleading statement. Nobody was ejected. The cup, the plastic cup, was thrown. It scratched the woman's forehead. She was given first aid. She then decided to continue within the premises. I would suggest it's an accident rather than anything malicious. And two officers have viewed the CCTV. I have the CCTV retained. It will be retained for 5 years. If any other officer wishes to look at it, I can provide it to them. We also have the witness list of every person who was in the venue of the night, which was provided to Essex Police. They cannot identify who it was. I cannot identify who it was. Yeah.
Any further questions from the councillors? No, I haven't got one. Right, we're going to move on now to questions from the objectors. Councillor Whitehouse.
There's just that one thing I wanted to raise, Chair. I did visit the premises, and that was helpful in understanding the CCTV and some of the operational policies. What I wanted to ask about was the difference between what you might call the current regime, which relies on multiple applications for tens, not applications, but multiple tens in order to operate till 2 o'clock, and the proposed, if the licence is granted. I understand, or can you just confirm that under the tens, the premises is limited to 500 people, including staff. Under the licence, it would be 700 people, excluding staff. But perhaps, more relevantly, what has been the attendance or what level have you been operating at under the tens up to now, please?
Thank you, Madam. In relation to temporary event notices, they're obviously listed in your agenda papers. Absolutely correct. They are limited to 499 and, in fact, less than 500. And that's inclusive of staff, and that is the restriction of a temporary event notice. And I note, and I'm sure the committee will have noted, of course, that that's a point which is raised by the police, that we haven't tested our systems with the capacity of the premises, and that's simply because we are not able to. I'm instructed by Mr. Hoffner, who will add a gloss to that in a moment. But that's one of the difficulties, and which is why we have tested it with temporary event notices. But I have to accept that it's not to the full capacity of 700. But Mr Hoffner is keen to correct me on.
Whilst it is correct, we haven't operated past 499 till 2 o'clock. We have operated with 700 people till 1 o'clock. And again, Essex Police are nodding and agreeing. So we have operated on Friday evenings when we haven't had temporary event notices with 700 people to 1 o'clock. So not only have we operated with 700 people in the venue, we have done it as much as we legally can, operating to 499 on the Saturday nights with 700 on the Friday nights, operating till 1 o'clock. And that's the most that the law at the moment will allow us to do. And so I hope that we can show that we have operated to the capacity and to the time, but with a lesser capacity, which is all that we can lawfully do, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Whitehouse, did you have a...
Sorry, I was just going to pick up on the second part of the question, if I may, Madam. The question, I think, related to the differences. I think the other difference in relation to temporary event notice, and being very straight with everybody in the room, is, of course, that a temporary event notice is for a specific occasion. It is limited, it is restricted. We have to go back to the licensing authority, and obviously who would involve the police through consultation and environmental health, in order to get each approval. Obviously, what we are seeking is a permanent change to the licence in order to be able to operate with the increased capacity to the increased to the additional time. And so there is, I accept, a substantial difference from how we've operated to what we're looking to operate with, but unfortunately we have to operate within the restrictions of the licence. We did seek, Madam, and I appreciate that the committee did not agree with our thought process, and that's understandable. We did seek to get a temporary licence for a limited period of time, which would enable us to operate through to a later time with an increased capacity. The committee said no, we'd like you to try temporary event notices, and that's obviously what we've done and how we've operated. Should the committee feel that it's appropriate to restrict the licence in a time-limited way, whilst I know, and I'm sure Mr Ranatunga will advise you on this, whilst I know there is authority to suggest that that may not be appropriate, it's not something that we would oppose if the committee felt that it was appropriate to, say, grant a licence until the end of 2022. Then it's something that we would accept and work with the committee on. But at the moment, as I say, the application is for a permanent licence. I think that addresses all points that you raised, but I'll move on.
I hope this doesn't come across as too pedantic, but when you say you've been operating at 700 up to 1 o'clock and 499 up to 2 o'clock, is that with that capacity, or actually you've had those numbers in the venue on a consistent basis?
Yes, we have had those numbers in the venue.
I think, to be fair in relation to that, over the period when we've operated, and I may have the figures wrong because I think it's only for the temporary event notices, I think we were looking in excess of 3,000 people who, that's only on the temporary event notice occasions, 3,000 people over those particular nights when we've had the temporary event notices.
Are there any other questions from objectors?
Yes, Madam Chair. Obviously we heard about the incident in which Essex Police are seeking to base the crime and disorder aspects of. And obviously Mr. Bunce, obviously very experienced police officer, in London, absolutely credentials are without question. The first incident we talked about was the fight between the unknown males, and about how disappointed he was about how Essex Police have dealt with it. My question is, obviously, Mr. Bunce, having been a police officer, you'd be aware of what Code G of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act is. If you could just please explain to the panel the relevance of it, because I think it would be important in this case.
I've got to say, I've been out for so long that Code G has completely escaped me. And I'm not going to lie about that because that is pointless. All right?
If I could just sort of briefly, it's not really a question, I just wanted to balance what's been said. Code G was introduced, it's been in since 1984, but however recently, it's every person who is arrested, every individual officer has got to ask the question, do I need to arrest this person right here, right now? I.e., if I go along and I know who that individual is, and I know who my victim is, could I not invite them into the police station at a later date, so that taking someone's liberty away is a very, very specific and powerful piece of legislation. So Code G was introduced for this very reason. And my understanding is at that time, although they had been detained, that both the suspect was unwilling to provide a statement to officers. So at the very start, the grounds for arresting the suspect or suspects would have been removed and potentially could have made the arrest unlawful had this have been looked at a later date. So I accept that on the face of it they had detained an individual and they was very disappointed about public order, very disappointed in the assault aspect of it, but the arrest is a very specific to the officers that attend, and we cannot second guess their rationale. And obviously Code G under the Police and Criminal Evidence Act is very clear that each officer must be clear as to why they're detaining someone and depriving them of their liberty.
Thank you for explaining that.
If I could just respond to that, because now you've jogged my memory about Code G. There are certain other aspects in relation to Code G where an arrest can be effected. One, if you cannot ascertain that person's name or address. Two, if there's forensic evidence immediately available, which there would have been in that circumstance with bloods, etc., and the fact that the situation would have allowed that, any custody sergeant would have accepted that arrest under Code G and the grounds around that. So I appreciate what you're saying, but the immediacy of that particular incident, Code G would have been covered.
Just on that, both parties were known, details were known, and as we look at this now in hindsight, the victims were unwilling to prosecute or support. The second question I want to ask about is obviously the second incident on the 21st of August 2021, where we heard it was a slight graze, it was an accident, etc., etc. Again, the next question is, under the Home Office counting rules, could you please just explain to the panel, because you made saying, oh, this is definitely not a Section 20 assault. Could you just sort of show the panel as to why you disagree with that and what that would mean?
If you read the law, Section 20 would say any wound or cut. But, having been a gatekeeper in my time and responsible for charging standards, you have to look at all the threshold tests and the charging standards that are around that. And there is absolutely no way there be sufficient evidence to support successful prosecution for a Section 20 with an injury of that nature. So I appreciate why it was possibly recorded as a Section 20, but both of us know that would no way be put before a court with that level of offence.
Again, Madam, I think that we present evidence from crime and disorder, and we have to draw from the crime database that we use. And what Mr. Bunce has failed to, we have the law, we have CPS charging standards, and we have what the Home Office expect us to record crimes as. The rationale behind that is, so if the same incident happens in London as it does in Carlisle, as it does in Wales, that it's recorded in exactly the same way so that there is a balance, so you can compare offences against offences in different areas. I am frustrated many, many times as well with what people do and what they're charged with, etc. But we can only present what we have found on our databases, and this is, it did break all layers of the skin, a weapon was used, and it fits quite perfectly within the Section 20 of the Home Office counting rules. I totally accept that we probably would never have charged anyone with that level of offence, but that's how it would be recorded. So we are presenting factual data in accordance with the Home Office. So that was just...
Madam, I think the only additional point I would make in relation to that is, of course, I'm grateful to... sorry, Ronan, I've forgotten your surname. Ronan. I do apologise. I'm grateful for him for accepting that it would never have been charged as such. I think, Madam, what we are looking to say is that whilst on the face of it, it looks very serious, actually, when you burrow down to it and look at it closely, then it's probably not as serious as it may appear on paper. And I think that's what we're trying to say.
My third question is for the third incident of the 22nd of the 8th, 2021 at 2:10 in the morning, where the individual was flagged down by the staff, like James. So again, they're out and about doing what they need to do. Appreciate that. And quite clearly, there was no evidence to suggest that the suspect was a customer at Playhouse. Conversely, there was no evidence to say that he wasn't. And on the balance of probability, potentially was. If we take into account at that time of the morning what other premises were open in the vicinity. So I accept one point that we didn't prove that they came from Playhouse, but we didn't prove that they didn't.
Sorry, this is turning into a bit of a tit for tat, and I will draw the line. That is not correct. The suspects were stopped by police in a vehicle where they were attempting to make off from the scene. So that is extensively not correct, and I appreciate that probably isn't the information that you have in front of you, but as somebody who was physically on scene, and Mr. Yeoman will confirm as he was on scene as well, they were stopped in a vehicle making their way, and they were stopped further down the high street. They had not been a club.
Thank you. Yeah, are there any further questions? In that case, yes. No, it's okay. A final statement. Oh, sorry, Councillor Lynders, please do.
If I may, just on the bottles, what you were saying, if I'm right, is that you've only tested it under a TENS licence and therefore not at full capacity. If you're actually going to escort bottles out of the premises with everybody of the 700 people that you've got there, or a large proportion, is this going to work with your staffing, or is there going to be perhaps a different way of doing this?
No, and as I said, I would be happy for a condition sorry, again, I'm sucking on a lozenge because my throat's gone very dry. I would be happy with a condition to condition that. The only people, we are polycarbonate within the venue, so any bottles that are ordered over the bar, and the vast majority of people of those 700 would be ordering drinks over the bar, will only get their drinks in a plastic cup. The only people who get glass bottles, and it is on the licence, are the people on the tables. Now, they still drink, their drinking vessels are still plastic cups, but they have the bottles there which are then poured into the cups for them to drink. These have to be larger than 75 centilitres, so bigger than a bottle of wine. So it's not bottles of beer that people are having. We don't serve bottles of beer to the tables. We only serve bottles of spirits, bottles of champagne, larger bottles. There are only 13 tables within the club. There will only be 13 tables within the club when the club opens to 700 people. It's the physical layout of the venue, and we're not proposing to change the physical layout of the venue. So, again, it's 13 opportunities for taking away bottles. When there are 700 people, there are 13 opportunities for taking away bottles at the same time. And that's it. So it's the same regardless of what the capacity is.
Sir, if I can again just put some bones into the flesh, if I may. Mr. Hoffner referred to a condition, page 62 of your bundle. refers to that particular condition. It's the very last condition on that page, from 2100 until close every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and at any other non-standard timings. All drinking vessels used in the premises should be polycarbonate. All drinks in glass bottles are to be decanted into polycarbonate containers or carafes prior to being served, with the exception of champagne bottles or bottles of spirits with a minimum size of 70 centilitres, supplied by waiter-waitress service to tables. Staff shall clear away all empty champagne and spirit bottles promptly from tables. Customers shall not be permitted to leave their table carrying any such glass bottles or to drink directly from the bottle.
That's a better condition.
Are there any other questions from objectors? Right, are there any statements now from the objectors? Final statements?
Sorry, Chair, yeah, this is now the opportunity for objectors to make their statements, and then after that there's the process of final statements to the parties. So it's the police, I would suggest, first, and then the other two objectors who are here.
Okay, so Madam Chair, Essex Police feel that due to the incidents of crime and disorder and public nuisance at the premises that have been documented in our objection, that having the premises open until 2 o'clock will...
Can you speak
Oh, sorry, can you not hear me? Yeah, so having the premises open until 2 o'clock we feel will further increase more incidents of crime and disorder, as stated in our body worn footage that we would like to show. This shows that at 3:05 there are still people hanging around on the high street, sort of causing a public nuisance and leading to crime and disorder. So if we could play that.
Yes, so could
we
the
play that video,
people
please?
here leave the room and we will watch
Yeah.
the footage? Yes?
Thank you.
Yes, can I
Please.
sorry.
Oh, sorry, I've got my...
Can I just check from the police, you do...
Raise it in public.
Chair, if the concern was about identifying individuals on the video, we've had discussion about the incident. The questions, I assume, will not be about individuals or help to identify them, so you can hear those in public session.
Thank you. And we'll hear the end of your statement. Is everyone back now? Yeah. Yes, so if you continue your statement,
So
please.
thank you, Madam Chair. So yeah, as you can see in that video, so that was actually an hour and 10 minutes after the premises had closed, and they had their 10 until 2 o'clock, and that body worn was actually recorded at 3:05 in the morning for 6 minutes. So you can see that there are still people hanging around Epping High Street sort of an hour and 10 minutes later. So to go on that, we feel that obviously the taxis that are picking up these people obviously do not have the capacity to sort of take that amount of people away from the area, considering it at the minute obviously they've sort of been there for an hour and 10 minutes, still loitering and still causing sort of a nuisance. As stated as well, obviously the premises has been operating under a temporary event, temporary event notices until 2 o'clock. So that is only 499 people, including staff. So Essex Police are concerned that by increasing that to 700 people, excluding staff, that on the balance of probabilities, the incidents of crime and disorder could go up, and public nuisance, because now you're increasing the amount of people by quite a lot. So yeah, based off of the evidence we've provided with crime and disorder, we think that will increase. So yeah, with the dispersals, with the taxis, I know it was mentioned that Ubers are being used. I know Ubers have limits as to how they can operate. So relying on those, people are still sort of hanging around a lot, which, and we've spoken to local taxi companies, and we've actually put in our objection as well, like the taxi companies that I've spoken to and how many taxis they have on. And just for the number of people, Essex Police feel that just 2 o'clock is too late to be operating under, and that 1 o'clock should remain. And yeah, is there anything you wanted to add, Ronan?
Just, Madam Chair, that I know it's only 60 minutes, but as you can see, when the premises close at say 2 o'clock, people just don't immediately evaporate. They do hang about, linger about, and additionally you have that extra hours drinking from the current regime. So that was just our concern, and we would really seek the guidance of the licensing panel, because we want the public to go out and enjoy themselves. We want the premises to operate safely and well, but we want it done safely. And we, Essex Police, just feel that 2 o'clock in this facility, in this area, is just too excessive given the evidence that we had. The same premises elsewhere probably wouldn't be an issue, but just where it's located, and that has historically been the issue, just the location and the times.
Thank you. And finally, are there any other objectors who would like to make a statement? Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'll try and be brief. I mean, there has been a night spot here for a long time, and I don't object to people trying to run a successful business as long as it doesn't unreasonably impact on the area where it's located. But my concern here is the later hours proposed. I mean, I think as we've heard, there's an awful lot of conditions already imposed on the club, quite onerous conditions. So it's not an issue where you can say, well, if we just tweak a condition here or add a condition there, that can solve the issues. I mean, it seems to me, the later the club is open, the greater the risk of crime, disorder and nuisance. It's evidenced by, what's happened previously, and in the context of a market town which gets quieter and quieter as the night goes on. I mean, one of the issues that's come up has been, the difference in capacity that this would lead to. I think we heard earlier that there have been 3,000 or just over 3,000 people through the venue under the tens. And that suggests the average attendance each time there's been a tens has been considerably less than the 499, even if it has reached capacity on occasion. And that's perhaps something to be clarified. And the noise generated by a small number of people and the potential for clashes and disorder with a relatively small number of people is much less than when you've got a club operating, pretty much near capacity, which presumably is what it needs and seeks to do. So it's specifically the licensed activities until 2 a.m. and the 2:30 a.m. closing time on the Friday and Saturday that I am concerned about. The other activities at the club, I've got no issues with those, but I hope the committee will take that into account when they have their deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehurst.
Just one question. The applicants applied for 13 occasions on tens. I don't believe the police objected to any of those, did they?
As you're aware, sir, tens are a permissive piece of legislation. It's almost like telling us we're having this. But we did have to take into account the fact of the previous licensing committee that said that we want you to test your regime of using tens. We felt that that would have been a poor show from Essex's police perspective to not even give the premises an opportunity to move forward. So as I say, it's a permissive piece of legislation, whereas this is a condition of the licence. It's a change. It sort of goes henceforth, and that was the reasons why.
Okay. Can I just ask Debbie Houghton, is it 14 a year for tens, or is it more applications?
They can have up to 21 days or 15 applications in any one calendar year.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Lyon, do you want to ask? No. No, in that case, the applicant may now make a final...
Chair, sorry, I think we've still got the Town Council.
I'm sorry,
Madam Chairman, thank you. Sorry, I thought you'd forgotten me there.
No,
Just simply this. I've sat here, I think, for several of the licence applications by Club 195. I'm afraid councillors do have long memories, and we had a lot of trouble with that application. I think here, on the face of it, the applicants have made a lot of efforts to be compliant. I really do have some doubts about their business model of how you can make, in a market town like Epping, make a nightclub with all the conditionality around what it takes to run this, how you can make that business work. And obviously they have, they're clear that they can do that. But I think, as Councillor Whitehouse said, the problem is, and I think the police are saying as well, is if people come out at 2:30 in the morning, we do have a problem around here. You know, the underground is closed. There's a lack of transport. People mill around. That's when you get problems. And I think we all remember, again, not your application, but 195, the gladiatorial fight that took place in one of the car parks in Epping about 3 in the morning, which we had. And obviously we don't want a repeat of that. So I think the Town Council, quite rightly, on the face of it, has suggested that closing at 1 makes more sense than 2 in the morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Sorry, Madam Chairman. I would like to draw the committee's attention to a conversation I had with two.
No, they've made their final statement. Are there any other final statements from the objectors? I think we've heard them all.
Sorry, Chair. I just want to come in on
Procedure.
So the applicants made their presentation, objectors have made their presentation. Questions were asked of the applicant. It's only right and fair that if the applicant has any questions of objectors, they be allowed to make them. After that is done, then it's time for final statements. All of the objectors will have an opportunity to make a final statement and the applicant will have the final word.
Thank you very much. So if there are any questions you would like to...
Madam, there are questions. I'm going to... I think Mr Hoffner was about to make a statement, but I'm going to ask him to put it in the form of a question and to approach it that way, and then I'll have some questions of the police, if I may.
Whilst we all sorry, Councillor Avery. Whilst we all understand the failings of Club 195, and we are stigmatised with that, and we fully accept that stigma, this is a completely new operation, and we have been successfully dispersing patrons, so much so that even at the weekend I had 2 uniformed response officers from Essex Police who came to me and said how successfully we dispersed and how we how well we dealt with everyone there. Do you think that it's fair that we keep harping on back to the Club 195, and would it not be right and proper of the licensing committee and the town council to give us a fair crack at the whip? There are powers which the licensing committee have to revoke the licence should we not do what we've said we do. I have invited the town council down. The town council haven't responded until this morning, and I just feel that there's a distinct lack of engagement from the town council. And why, if they're not willing to engage, are they just objecting and sticking their head in the sand?
Thank you for that. I think I suggested that councillors have a long memory, and I'm afraid I can't speak for other councillors on my committee, and I'm just speaking for what was a democratic decision reached by our committee. I have personal views, which obviously are not relevant, but what I would say is I'm happy for any business to make a go in Epping, and I certainly never want to see Club 195 scenario back again. If you can make a go of it, so be it. And the town council will be, if you are granted a licence, will follow its progress with interest, and I wish you all success.
Thank you, Councillor. In respect of the video that we've seen, at the start of the video, a gentleman is arrested or is in the face of the police officer. You may not know, but if I was to say that he was the guy that was handed over to the police by the club in handcuffs, are you in a position to be able to accept that? Sorry.
Yeah, and neither of us were there. We couldn't say who you handed over and whether that's one and the same individual. Sorry.
That same individual is then chased around the high street at various different times and is, I think, then rearrested at the very end of the video. Again, you may not be able to assist the committee, but it wasn't the same guy. Is it not the same? No. The guy at the end of the video who is arrested by the police, again, you may not be able to assist the committee, but if I was to suggest to you that he is, in fact, released by the police shortly after that, are you in a position to be able to accept that?
I'm reliably informed by Kelsey that that is the case, yes, sir.
He was released, yeah.
If I was to suggest to the police that had the arrest been followed through from the club of the two individuals who were handed over to the police in handcuffs, had that arrest been followed through and they had been taken away to a police station, this whole incident would not have happened, what would your response be to that?
Again, without going back into the Code G and the right to the individual officers, I don't know. Hindsight is a wonderful gift. I don't know. I think, moreover, what we were trying to show is that at 3 or 10 past 3 a.m., that's an hour and 10 minutes after the premises had closed, that we still had people milling around. We had no obvious public transport or transport to take people away. It was more to show the committee that this is what is being faced at an hour and 10 minutes after the close of the premises. And if we were to increase that extra hour to 2 a.m., we're looking at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock potentially. So were the individuals arrested? Potentially, but that wasn't the rationale for showing the footage.
Following on from that particular occasion, the premises is operated on 17 occasions to a later time. Are there any other occasions when such activity has taken place, as is seen on that particular date?
Sorry, I don't quite understand the question.
Is there any other allegations from Essex Police that dispersal was not successfully carried out by the staff on any other occasion except for that one particular evening? You haven't presented any other evidence apart from the opening night that there was any problem with dispersal?
We haven't got any other body-worn evidence to suggest.
Sorry, that wasn't the question. Is there any evidence or any feedback from any officers that, whether it's here or not, that dispersal were not carried out? I would suggest, given the conversation I had with 2 response officers at the weekend, that there is not.
That hasn't come to my attention, no.
I think the only other question, Madam, I have is that I understood there was a second video to be shown, but is that not to be shown?
That was a YouTube video. I wasn't actually able to pull that to download it. I'm not very technical, I won't lie, but it is literally, pop that link on YouTube and it does come up. I don't know if anyone has seen. So yeah, it's basically it's that same incident. It doesn't necessarily show disorders, but it shows people out on the streets of Epping High Street. A number of them, once the premises had closed, a member of the public goes round filming, and you can see the amount of people that have come out onto the street.
So it's just the one incident on the I may be wrong on the date. It's the 25th of July, correct?
Right, are we moving to the final statement? Right. So
Sorry, Madam, I do apologise. I'm reminded of something I should have asked the officer in relation to the video, and I do apologise. In respect of the video that was shown, the body-worn video doesn't show any of the security or staff from Playhouse. And are you able to confirm that that was because they had been asked to leave the area and return to the venue?
No, I'm not aware that that's what officers told staff members. I haven't got anything to suggest that.
I think going back to the video, you recall there was a female voice can be heard on the video at a particular time. I think it's when the guy is being arrested towards the end. Again, you may not be able to assist me, but as I understand it, that's a female sergeant who's in charge and asked the staff, the managers, security from Playhouse to leave. You're not able to assist me, I think, because you're looking at me as though... Okay, thank you. No further questions, Madam.
thank you. So now we are going to hear final statements from the objectors first. Does any objector want to make a final statement? Councillor Whitehouse.
I mean, obviously there's been a lot of things said today and sort of he said, she said type of issue, some of which I've not seen. And I just urge the committee, I suppose, not to get too drawn into the weeds on this. I mean, at the end of the day, the committee's it's been decided that 3 a.m. is not acceptable, 1 a.m. is acceptable, so does an extension to 2 a.m. compromise any of the licensing objectives? And I think what I'd suggest to the committee is, although it's operated more or less successfully, although taking into account the issues that police have had at a relatively low level with the TENS, the intensification which comes with operating more frequently with a larger capacity does impact on both on the licensing objectives in terms of crime and disorder and in terms of the impact on local residents. And therefore, the previous decision, which I quote in my representation, probably remains the right place to be. So, on that basis, I'd suggest that the committee sticks to the current 1 a.m. times.
Thank you. Finally, the applicant will...
Ma'am, just what's already been said. We don't wish to go over all the ground.
No.
We would just seek your guidance. We think 3 o'clock's too late. 1 o'clock is, we feel, is appropriate. Obviously, the premises think 2 o'clock's a good stepping stone. We don't feel that, so we'd be very much sort of led by what you feel is appropriate in these circumstances.
Thank you.
Madam, what I said at the start was that we were looking to establish to the committee 4 reasons as to why this application should be granted. Looking back at the original decision that was made and is set out at page 79 of your papers, that the committee, in granting the premises licence, were taking into account the applicant's right to apply for temporary event notices, which would give them an opportunity to road test their new model to a later hour, and the possibility of making an application to vary the licence we have granted to extend the hours of operation if the applicant can demonstrate that doing so would not undermine the licensing objectives. Madam, that's repeated, I would submit, by the committee's refusal to grant a temporary licence, a time-limited licence, to extend the hours to 3 o'clock. And that's set out at page 82, where again the committee indicates that they were refusing the application, and they say there's inadequate evidence to demonstrate the premises can be satisfactorily operated in line with the licensing objectives until 0300. We also remain of the view that the premises could seek a temporary event notice to road test the later opening hours. The pandemic struck, the premises remained closed and really effectively only managed to open in the summer, and then the nightclub element opened in July. The premises has exhausted the extent of the temporary event notices and the temporary event notice system that is available to them. The temporary event notice system, as has rightly been indicated, has limitations, both in the number of occasions that can be used, but also in the capacity. We have sought to demonstrate to the committee, either through the extension of hours on occasions, or without the extension of hours, but with a full capacity of up to 700, that the systems that we have promote the licensing objectives. We say that the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and we say that what has happened since July demonstrates that we can promote the licensing objectives. The objections which have been raised by the police and the specific instances raised by the police, Mr. Bunch deals with them in his report. The majority do not relate to the operation of the premises. There are 2 instances where it's said by the police that they relate specifically to the operation of the premises. The first in July, and you've heard from the premises as to how, in fact, they had arrested the individuals that led to the incident at the end of the day and handed them over as arrested individuals to the police. And it's following on from that that the problem arises. Even if you're not with me on that, though, Madam, that happens back in July. The systems are reviewed, the systems are put into practice, and it's clear that from that date, there is no evidence from the police or from any of the local residents that crime and disorder has ensued. There is no evidence of any nuisance. If there was, then you would have it. If there was evidence of nuisance, then the environmental health officer would be here and would have produced that evidence to you. There is no evidence of nuisance. There is no evidence from the police in relation to nuisance. In relation to crime and disorder, the police rely upon the video of July, and we've addressed that at length. Looking at the options that are available to the committee, what we say is that the committee, in looking at their responsibility of making a decision to promote the licensing objectives, that by granting this variation, the licensing objectives can be promoted, and there is evidence to show that. You have that evidence from the operation that has been presented to you. If the committee are not with me in relation to, and this is picking up, I think, in relation to the councillors' comments from the Town Council. If the issue was that there was a concern in respect of an increase in capacity, then it is possible for the committee to say, well, Mr. Sutherland, you've satisfied us that your processes and your systems that are in place promote the licensing objectives. But there is still a concern, and therefore we would look to limit the capacity to 500. Then that is something that, again, we would look to work with the committee on. So whilst our application is in respect of the full capacity of the premises of 700, and whilst I would submit to you that there's sufficient evidence to grant the application for 700, if you're not with me, then it is open to the committee to restrict that capacity. Likewise, whilst I say that there's sufficient evidence for the committee to grant the application through till 2 o'clock for 700 people in an unlimited way, and the reason that I would say that is because that's the committee asked for us to operate through temporary event notices, and we have done that in the best way that we can. The committee are aware, because everyone has spoken about the 195 Club. That premises was closed down very, very quickly. A summary review. The premises was closed. If Mr. Hoffner and his team did not do what they have been doing and did not fulfill what they have said they would do and have done so far, then it would be open for the police to bring a summary review if it was necessary to close the place instantaneously. That's what happened. The system works. And that's the basis on which I submit to the committee that because that system is in place, you can legitimately grant the application unlimited. Now, if you're not with me on that, as I indicated earlier, and I'm sure that your legal advisor will advise you in this regard, there is authority to suggest that what I'm about to suggest to you, a committee should not do. However, I am suggesting to the committee that instead of saying, okay, well, we're not happy about granting it in an unlimited way, then it is possible for the committee to grant a time-limited variation. So it would be possible, I would submit, to impose a condition on the licence that the hours be extended until 2 o'clock with effect from the date of your decision, but to cease to have effect in, I would suggest, the 31st of December, or perhaps to allow us to operate for New Year's Eve on the 31st of December 2022, to go through to maybe the 3rd of January 2023. So that would, in effect, give the premises an opportunity of 14 months to, again, to build on the practices that have been in place, to build on the evidence that we say has been in place since July, to prove and to establish and hopefully to receive the support from the Town Council, who are wishing us every success, that we can, we have, we will do everything that is possible to promote the licensing objectives through the intense operation that is actually in place at this particular premises. It's been mentioned by the objectors in relation to the extensive conditions which are in place, the onerous conditions which are in place. But they are the conditions which we have offered and agreed to, that we have implemented and applied. They work. And it's on that basis that we submit to this committee that they can be assured that we will promote the licensing objectives if this application is granted through till 2 o'clock. So, Madam, my first point is to grant it to 2 o'clock in an unrestricted way. If you're not with me on that, then to grant it for a time-limited basis for the full capacity. If you're not with me on that, Madam, then what I would invite the committee to do is to restrict the capacity through till, I would say 500, though I appreciate that the temporary event notice has only allowed us to operate with 499, but I would ask that it was 500. And the licence be varied to allow us to operate to the later time with a limited capacity of 500. Madam, I don't know whether I can assist you further or whether there are any questions on matters that I've raised.
No more questions. I just want to clarify finally, just with Mr. Sutherland, please. It is the extra, so it's a variation application for an additional hour on Fridays and Saturdays between 1 and 2, and the reduction on the Thursday by 1 hour, and for both on and off sales. But insofar as it's off sales, it relates to those resealed containers when people leave only. Okay, so the hours on the application cover the full extent of the licence, but in terms of a variation, it's only what I've just outlined. Sorry.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
In terms of conditions, you've told us what other conditions you might have, but it's all those that are currently there on the licence and those which would be consistent with the operating schedule.
That is correct, and obviously I've raised a number of other options within the decision, but yes.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Well, the committee will now retire to discuss this in private.
John White has gone, I presume, has he?
I don't know, maybe they're coming back in. Should we check if... oh, there's somebody out there.
I've gone home. What, did you call one? Oh, well. We'll let him off.
Oh, has he gone back?
You can see it on Zoom, can't he, or online. Are the councillors coming back? No, they're not. No, I'm not surprised. Right. Yes. Right. Right. This is a summary of the decision of the licensing subcommittee. The decision of this subcommittee is that the application to vary the premises licence in respect of Playhouse and Essex Roof Garden, 195199 Cottis Lane, Epping, CM16 4BL, be granted subject to the following conditions, which in the opinion of this subcommittee are reasonable, proportionate and in the public interest for the promotion of the licensing objectives. Subject to the existing conditions on the licence, and this word, and conditions consistent with the operating schedule. This will allow the premises to open for an additional hour on Friday and Saturday to its full capacity. However, the application to allow off sales of alcohol is refused. In addition, the variation shall be time limited for a period of 9 months. The reasons for this decision will be published within 5 working days of this decision. The decision notice will include appeal rights for all parties. Thank you.
Sorry, can I
Yes.
just clarify one point?
Yes.
Just in relation to the off sales, is that in relation to the variation of the off sales, not in relation to the off sales as they were? So off sales would carry on up until 1 o'clock, but not from after 1 till 2. Do you follow what I mean?
Yes, the
Okay.
intention of the committee was that no bottles of alcohol, full, empty, half full, are taken off the premises. Is that clear? Yes, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma.
Thank you very much, everyone. It's been a long day, but thank you, everyone.